The desperate signal. The crystal spires of New Corvith burned against the night sky, their elegant curves now twisted monuments to destruction. High Coordinator Zephyr stood at the observation deck of the Grand Assembly, watching another transport ship fall from orbit in a ball of orange flame. The Corvani had built their civilization on principles of art, philosophy, and peaceful exploration. They had never imagined that such beauty could be turned to ash so quickly. "Coordinator," came a voice behind him. Zephyr turned to see Science Minister Vilak approaching, her normally pristine robes now stained with dust and grief. "The outer colonies have gone silent. Kepler VII, Harmony Station, the research outpost on Theta Minor, all of them." Zephyr closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 17 billion souls pressing down on his shoulders. The Corvani were a tall, graceful species, standing nearly 9 feet in height with elongated limbs and skin that shifted between pale blue and silver depending on their emotional state. Right now, Zephyr knew his skin showed the deep indigo of despair. "How long do we have?" he asked quietly. "The savage hegemony's war fleets will reach the inner system within 6 cycles, Velak replied. "Our defense forces managed to delay them at the Crimson Nebula, but at a terrible cost." Admiral Jorvak's entire squadron was destroyed. The enemy didn't even slow down. The savage hegemony was everything the Corvani were not. Where the Corvani built gardens, the hegemony built weapons. Where the Corvani composed symphonies that could make stars weep, the hegemony composed only screams. They were a coalition of the galaxy's most brutal species, united under the iron fist of General Throck, whose very name meant pain in the old tongue. Zephyr walked to the central chamber where the Emergency Council had convened. 12 of the greatest minds in Corvani space sat around a floating crystal table, their faces showing the same hopelessness that Zephyr felt in his hearts. The Corvani had 2 hearts, a biological quirk that had made them excellent philosophers. They often joked. 1 heart for logic, 1 for emotion. Right now, both hearts were breaking. "What news from the Galactic Confederation?" asked Elder Mirian, the oldest member of the council. "They expressed their deepest sympathies," replied Foreign Minister Korath bitterly. "But they cannot spare ships. The hegemony has struck too many fronts simultaneously. Everyone is protecting their own worlds first." "Then we are truly alone," whispered Cultural Keeper Solana. "Not necessarily," said a voice from the shadows. Dr. Iron stepped forward, the chief of Xenorchaeology, carrying an ancient data crystal. "I have been researching the old archives, particularly the forbidden files from the early expansion period." An uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber. The forbidden files contained information about species that had been deemed too dangerous for contact. Worlds that were classified as approach prohibited by the Galactic Confederation. "Aaron," Zephyr said carefully, "surely you are not suggesting what I think you are suggesting." The archaeologist placed the crystal in the center of the table, and a holographic display materialized above it. It showed a small yellow star with 9 planets, the third one glowing with blue and green light. Text scrolled beside it in the ancient script of the first explorers. "Sol 3, also designated as Earth," Aaron read aloud. "Home to the species known as humans. Classification: extreme caution required. Gravity: 1.7 times standard. Atmospheric pressure: 1.3 times standard. Climate: highly variable and often hostile. Dominant species evolved from persistence predators. Psychological profile: highly aggressive, unpredictable, and dangerously adaptable. Status: quarantine recommended." Elder Mirian's skin had gone completely pale. "You want us to contact the Death World species, the ones our ancestors were so terrified of that they sealed off their entire system." "I want us to survive," Aaron replied firmly. "Look at these historical fragments. 700 years ago, our long-range scouts detected massive electromagnetic signatures from the Sol system. Industrial activity on a scale that defied belief. Ship construction. Weapons testing. The scouts were so frightened by what they saw that they recommended we never make contact. "And now you want to invite these monsters to our home?" demanded Minister Korith. "These monsters might be our only hope," Eren shot back. "The archaeological evidence suggests they had already developed interplanetary travel when our scouts first observed them. That was 7 centuries ago. By now, they might have capabilities that could match the savage hegemony." Zephyr studied the display showing Earth, this small world that had inspired such terror in their ancestors. The planet looked almost peaceful from space, wrapped in white clouds and blue oceans. It was hard to imagine what kind of horrors could have evolved in such a place. "What do we know about their current status?" he asked. Eren manipulated the display, showing scattered intelligence reports. Long-range sensors have detected continued electromagnetic activity, radio signals, energy signatures consistent with fusion technology, and something else. Gravitational anomalies that suggest they might have developed faster than light travel. The implications were staggering. If the humans had achieved FTL capability, they would be the first Death World species to escape their home system. The thought sent chills through every Corvani present. "Even if we could contact them," said Elder Mirian slowly, "why would they help us? We have ignored them for centuries. For all we know, they might side with the savage hegemony. Or," said Zephys quietly, "they might be our salvation." The debate continued for hours. Some council members argued that contacting the humans would be inviting one destroyer to fight another. Others pointed out that they were already facing extinction, so the risk might be acceptable. Finally, as the first light of Corvith's twin suns began to paint the sky, Zephys called for silence. "The choice before us is simple," he said, his voice carrying the weight of command. "We can die with dignity, maintaining our principles to the end. Or we can reach out to beings we do not understand, in the hope that somewhere in this dark galaxy there still exists mercy." The vote was close, but pragmatism won over fear. By a margin of 7-5, the Emergency Council authorized contact with Earth. Dr. Iren worked frantically to construct a message using the ancient protocols from the Forbidden Files. The humans, according to the old records, used primitive electromagnetic communications, though by now they had surely developed more sophisticated methods. The message would need to be broadcast on multiple frequencies, using mathematical constants and stellar coordinates to prove its authenticity. "How do we even address them?" asked Vilak as they composed the transmission. "We know nothing about their social structures or customs." "We tell them the truth," Zephys replied. "We are dying, and we need help." The message was surprisingly simple when they finally completed it. It contained basic information about the Corvani, their location, and the nature of the threat they faced. Most importantly, it included detailed tactical information about the savage hegemony's capabilities and movements. If the humans decided to help, they would need to know what they were facing. The transmission was sent from the most powerful communications array in Corvani space, aimed directly at the Sol system. It would take several cycles for the signal to reach Earth, and several more for any response to return. Time they might not have. 3 cycles passed in agonizing silence. The savage hegemony's advance fleets had entered the outer system, systematically destroying the automated defense platforms. Refugee ships from the outer worlds brought tales of horror that made even the bravest Corvani weep. Then, on the 4th cycle, something changed. Long-range sensors detected new gravitational signatures at the edge of the system. Not the brutal, angular ships of the hegemony, but something else entirely. The signatures were smaller, more numerous, and moving with a precision that suggested advanced technology. "Coordinator," called the communications officer, her voice shaking with excitement. "We're receiving a transmission. It's coming from the new contacts." "On speakers," Zephys ordered. The voice that filled the chamber was unlike anything they had ever heard. It was deeper than any Corvani voice, rougher, but somehow reassuring in its confidence. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force, responding to your distress call. We received your transmission, and we're en route to your position. Hold tight, Corvani. The cavalry is coming." Zephys felt his skin shift from indigo despair to the golden hue of hope. Around the chamber, other council members were staring at the speakers in amazement. These humans, these supposed monsters from a death world, had crossed the void to help complete strangers. How long until they arrive? He asked the sensor operator. Unknown. Coordinator. They're moving faster than anything in our databases. If they maintain current velocity, they could be here within hours. The humans had not just responded to their call for help. They had already been traveling toward Corvani space, which meant they had left Earth almost immediately after receiving the message. The implications were staggering. Either they possessed FTL technology far superior to anything the Galactic Confederation had achieved, or they had taken an enormous leap of faith by committing their forces to help an unknown species. As the cycles passed, more details emerged about the approaching human fleet. There were hundreds of ships, ranging from small escorts to massive vessels that dwarfed even the largest Corvani construction. Their technology was completely unknown, using energy signatures that didn't match any known physics models. Coordinator, said the communications officer, we're receiving another transmission from the human fleet. They're requesting permission to enter our system and coordinate with our remaining defense forces. Zephys straightened his robes and activated the reply channel. For the first time in cycles, he felt something approaching optimism. Admiral Chen, this is High Coordinator Zephys of the Corvani Assembly. You have our deepest gratitude for responding to our call. You have full authorization to enter our system. We will provide you with all available intelligence on enemy dispositions and capabilities. Understood, Coordinator, came the reply. We'll be dropping out of FTL in approximately 2 hours. Fair warning, we're coming in hot and heavy. The savage hegemony is about to learn why you don't mess with people under human protection. As the transmission ended, Zephys looked around at his council members. Their skin colors had shifted from despair to cautious hope, and for the first time since this nightmare began, he allowed himself to believe they might survive. The humans were coming, and the galaxy was about to discover what happened when a Death World species decided to play hero. Thunder across the stars. The human fleet materialized in Corvani space, like thunder rolling across the stars. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the flagship UES Indomitable, watching as 347 human vessels dropped out of hyperspace simultaneously. The precision of the maneuver would have been impossible for most species, but humans had been perfecting fleet coordination for centuries through constant warfare on Earth and in the colonies. Fleet reports all green across the board, Admiral, announced Commander Torres, Chen's second-in-command. All ships have successfully transitioned to normal space. No casualties, no mechanical failures. Chen nodded, her eyes fixed on the tactical display showing the Corvani system. She was a compact woman by human standards, standing barely 5.5 feet tall, but her presence commanded the bridge with quiet authority. Her dark hair was streaked with premature gray from years of deep space command, and her brown eyes held the steady gaze of someone who had faced death and emerged victorious. Status on the Corvani fleet, she asked. Detecting 47 vessels of various classes, all showing significant battle damage, replied Lieutenant Commander Park from the sensor station. Their technology appears to be primarily defensive in nature. Beautiful ships, Admiral, but not built for this kind of fight. Through the main view screen, Chen could see the distant glimmer of Corvith Prime, the jewel of Corvani civilization. Even from this distance, she could detect the scars of orbital bombardment. The savage hegemony had been systematically destroying everything of beauty or cultural significance, as was their custom. Incoming transmission from the Corvani flagship, announced the communications officer. Put them through, full visual, Chen ordered. The view screen shifted to show the interior of an alien bridge. The beings she saw there were unlike anything in the human databases. They were tall and graceful, with elongated limbs and skin that seemed to shimmer between different shades of blue and silver. Despite their alien appearance, their expressions of hope and desperation were universally recognizable. Admiral Chen, said the figure at the center of the screen. I am High Coordinator Zephy's. On behalf of all Corvani, I welcome you to our system, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Chen stepped forward, noting how the alien's skin shifted to a warmer golden hue as she approached. Coordinator, we're here to help. Can you provide us with current tactical information on the enemy forces? Zephy's gestured, and a holographic display materialized, showing the positions of savage hegemony ships throughout the system. Chen studied it with a professional eye, noting the enemy's formations and movement patterns. The hegemony was clearly following a doctrine of systematic destruction, methodically eliminating targets of cultural and strategic importance. Their main fleet is composed of over 600 vessels, Zephy's explained. They are commanded by General Throck aboard the battleship Deathbringer. We estimate they will reach the inner system within 12 hours. Chen's tactical officer, Major Rodriguez, whistled softly. 600 to our 347. Not the worst odds we've faced, but not the best either. Quality over quantity, Major, Chen replied calmly. She turned back to the view screen. Coordinator, we'd like to send a diplomatic team aboard your flagship to coordinate our efforts. Dr. Marcus Webb is our xenobiologist and diplomatic specialist. He'll need to understand your capabilities and limitations if we're going to work together effectively. Zephy's skin brightened noticeably. Of course, Admiral. We will prepare to receive your team. An hour later, Dr. Webb stood in the elegant crystal corridors of the Corvani flagship Harmony's Voice, marveling at the artistic beauty integrated into every surface. The Corvani had built their ships as works of art, as much as functional vessels. Every wall panel was carved with intricate patterns, every junction decorated with crystalline sculptures that seemed to sing with harmonic frequencies. Your vessels are incredible, Webb told his escort, a Corvani named Minister Villac. The integration of aesthetic and function is unlike anything we've ever seen. Villac's skin showed a pleased amber glow. We believe that to surround oneself with beauty is to honor the universe that created us. Every Corvani ship is unique, crafted by artists as well as engineers. They entered the main conference chamber, where High Coordinator Zephy's waited with several other officials. Webb was struck by how their skin colors seemed to communicate emotion as clearly as their words. It was a level of openness that would have been impossible for most human cultures. Dr. Webb, Zephy's greeted him. We are curious about your people. The old records suggest humans are aggressive by nature, yet you have traveled across the galaxy to help strangers. Webb smiled. We can be aggressive when necessary, Coordinator. But we're also pack animals at heart. We form strong bonds with those we consider part of our community. Today, the Corvani are part of that community. The explanation seemed to puzzle the aliens. But we are not your species. We have never met before. Why would you risk your lives for us? Because it's the right thing to do, Webb replied simply. And because someone who destroys beauty and art, who attacks peaceful civilizations, is everyone's enemy. As they spoke, Admiral Chen was conducting her own briefing aboard the Indomitable. Her senior staff filled the war room, studying holographic displays of the enemy fleet. The savage hegemony ships were brutal affairs, all angles and armor plating, designed for intimidation as much as destruction. Analysis of enemy vessels shows heavy armor and weapons, but limited maneuverability, reported Major Rodriguez. They appear to favor overwhelming firepower over tactical flexibility. Classic mistake, commented Captain Williams, commanding officer of the heavy cruiser Thunderstrike. They're used to fighting opponents who surrender when faced with superior numbers. Chen stood at the head of the tactical table, her mind racing through possibilities. Human military doctrine had been forged through centuries of conflict against opponents who often had superior numbers or technology. They had learned to win through innovation, adaptation, and what their enemies often called insane courage. They're expecting us to fight like the Corvani, she said finally. Defensive positions, organized retreats, trying to protect every asset. We're not going to do that. The room fell silent as her officers waited for her to continue. "We're going to hit them with everything we have, all at once, right in the teeth of their main formation. Fast, brutal, and completely unexpected. Commander Torres, begin implementing Doctrine 7. Several officers exchanged glances. Doctrine 7 was one of the most aggressive battle plans in the human military handbook, designed for situations where conventional tactics would lead to certain defeat. "Admiral," said Captain Martinez from the destroyer squadron, "Doctrine 7 has never been tested against a fleet that size." "Then today we make history," Chen replied. "Signal all ships. We're going to show the savage hegemony what happens when they pick a fight with humans." The battle began 6 hours later as the human fleet accelerated toward the approaching enemy formation. The Corvani watched in amazement as the human ships moved with a precision and aggression that defied everything they understood about space combat. "They're not even trying to protect their flanks," observed Science Minister Villak aboard the Corvani flagship. "It appears to be suicide." But High Coordinator Zephyz was beginning to understand. "No," he said slowly, watching the tactical display. "They're not trying to survive the battle. They're trying to win it." The human fleet struck the savage hegemony's forward elements like a hammer blow. Instead of engaging in long-range bombardment as expected, the human ships closed to point-blank range, their weapon systems unleashing devastating salvos that punched through enemy shields and armor like paper. General Throck, aboard his flagship Deathbringer, watched in disbelief as his advanced squadrons simply disintegrated under the human assault. "What are these creatures?" he snarled to his bridge crew. "They'd fight like madmen." "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "they're using ramming attacks combined with close-quarters bombardment. Our formations are being disrupted by their speed and aggression." Throck had commanded savage hegemony forces for over 20 years, crushing dozens of civilizations through superior numbers and brutal tactics. He had never encountered an enemy that seemed to welcome close combat. "All ships, concentrate fire on their flagship," he ordered. "Kill their commander, and they'll fall apart like all the others." But Admiral Chen had anticipated this response. As enemy fire converged on the Indomitable, the human flagship suddenly broke apart into multiple sections, each one continuing to fight independently. What the enemy had thought was a single large ship was actually a modular command platform, designed to separate and continue operations even under concentrated attack. "Adaptive command structure activated," announced Commander Torres from his section of the former flagship. "All fleet elements maintain full tactical coordination." The savage hegemony forces, trained to target command structures, found themselves facing an enemy with no single point of failure. Every human ship seemed capable of independent action, while remaining perfectly coordinated with the fleet. Dr. Webb, monitoring the battle from the Corvani flagship, watched as human vessels executed maneuvers that should have been impossible. Ships spinning while firing, using gravitational assists from debris fields, even deliberately ramming enemy vessels to destroy them. "How are they surviving those collisions?" asked Minister Villak in amazement. "Human ships are built differently," Webb explained. "We've always lived in a dangerous universe. Our vessels are designed to take damage and keep fighting." The battle raged for hours, with the human fleet systematically dismantling the savage hegemony formation. What should have been a crushing victory for the superior numbers became a rout as human tactics proved devastating against enemies unprepared for such aggressive warfare. Finally, General Throck himself was cornered as his flagship found itself surrounded by human vessels. Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication channels, broadcast throughout the system. "General Throck, this is Admiral Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. Your fleet is broken, your ships are scattered, and your reign of terror ends today. Surrender now, and you'll be treated according to the laws of war. Continue fighting, and we'll show you what humans do to those who threaten innocent civilizations." Throck's response was a snarl of defiance and a final desperate attack. The Deathbringer opened fire with all weapons, but the human ships had already adapted their tactics to his vessel's capabilities. Coordinated fire from a dozen human cruisers overwhelmed his shields, and the Hegemony flagship died in a ball of expanding plasma. With their commander dead and their fleet in ruins, the remaining savage Hegemony forces fled the system. The human fleet did not pursue. Instead, they turned their attention to rescue operations, pulling survivors from disabled ships and providing aid to damaged Corvani vessels. In the aftermath of victory, High Coordinator Zephyr stood once again in his observation chamber, but now the view was very different. Human ships moved through the system with quiet efficiency, their crews working alongside Corvani teams to repair the damage. Where once there had been only despair, now there was hope. Admiral Chen's shuttle docked with the Corvani flagship, and the human commander walked through corridors that now gleamed with renewed light. When she entered the council chamber, every Corvani present rose in respect. "Admiral," said Zephyr, his skin showing the deepest gratitude gold, "there are no words in our language sufficient to express our debt to humanity." Chen smiled, and for the first time since arriving in the system, she looked truly relaxed. "Coordinator, you don't owe us anything. We did what we had to do, what we wanted to do. The galaxy is a better place with the Corvani in it." She paused, looking around at the assembled aliens who had gone from terror to hope in a single day.